when a police officer raised her gun at an off-duty Army veteran. Everything changed in an instant, thanks to the crowd's reaction. It started as just another evening, filled with the hum of activity, in a supermarket in Sacramento, California. The rhythmic beeping of checkout scanners and the soft buzz of conversation created a familiar, almost comforting atmosphere. Shoppers moved casually between aisles, their carts filling with everything from fresh vegetables to frozen pizza. Among them was Nathaniel Davis, a 48-year-old retired senior Army officer. Now working in logistics, he was as unassuming as any other shopper that night. Dressed in a plain navy sweatshirt and jeans, Nathaniel could have blended in anywhere. His military uniform, a symbol of his years of dedicated service, was neatly folded back home. Pushing a small shopping cart through the dairy aisle, he reached out for a carton of almond milk, a simple task that would soon lead to an extraordinary confrontation. As Nathaniel scanned the shelves, he felt an odd sensation, like someone was watching him. It wasn't paranoia, it was the unmistakable weight of someone's gaze. He turned slightly and caught sight of a police officer standing at the aisle's edge. Her crisp, white uniform was a stark contrast to the casual crowd around her. She wasn't there to shop, she was focused intensely on him. At first, Nathaniel brushed it off. His years in the military had taught him to remain calm and not jump to conclusions. He nodded politely at her, a gesture of respect, but her tense expression and unwavering stare sent a clear message. This was no casual glance. Something about the situation felt off. Nathaniel moved on, steering his cart toward the canned goods aisle. Yet the unsettling feeling didn't fade. Every time he glanced back, there she was, standing just a little too close, her hand hovering near her holstered weapon. What could this possibly be about? He wondered. Still, he tried to shake it off. She's just doing her job, probably being cautious, he thought. But when he turned into the frozen food section, the tension only escalated. It wasn't his imagination. She was following him. Nathaniel tightened his grip on the cart, determined to stay calm, even as unease crept in. He continued shopping, selecting items for a quiet dinner at home. Yet, this silent game of cat and mouse felt more intense by the second. As Nathaniel paused by the produce section, carefully picking a bundle of spinach, the officer made her move. Her voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "Excuse me, sir. I need to speak with you." Nathaniel turned to face her, his expression steady. Years of leading troops under fire had taught him the importance of composure in tense situations. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked evenly. She stepped closer, narrowing her eyes as she scrutinized him. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area. I need to know what you're doing here," she said, her tone clipped. Nathaniel blinked, taken aback by the sudden accusation. "I'm grocery shopping like everyone else," he replied, gesturing to his cart, now half full. The officer's eyes darted to the cart before returning to him. "I'm going to need to see some identification," she demanded. "Identification? For buying spinach and almond milk?" Nathaniel let out a soft, incredulous laugh, shaking his head. "With all due respect, officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Is there a specific reason you're asking me for ID?" Her jaw tightened, and her hand moved to rest firmly on her holster. The silent threat was unmistakable. "Sir, I'm not going to ask again. Show me your ID." The air grew heavier as nearby shoppers began to notice the exchange. Nathaniel could feel their curious, concerned stares. He took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Officer, I don't know what you think I've done, but I'm not required to show ID just for walking through a store. If there's a specific accusation, let's address it. Otherwise, I'd like to finish my shopping." Her expression hardened further, and her voice became more aggressive. "I saw you acting suspiciously, walking up and down the aisles like you're casing the place. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Nathaniel's heart pounded, not out of fear, but frustration. This wasn't his first experience with baseless suspicion, but it was different this time. He wasn't in uniform, wasn't on a battlefield. He was in a supermarket, just another customer, or so he thought. Before he could respond, the officer's voice rose, drawing even more attention. If you're refusing to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to take further action. Nathaniel raised his hand slightly, a gesture of caution and de-escalation. I'm cooperating, officer. I'm just asking for a little respect, he said calmly. But respect wasn't on the agenda. What happened next shattered the uneasy calm of the store. Hands where I can see them. Now, she barked, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Her hand gripped the handle of her gun, and the atmosphere shifted in an instant. Shoppers froze, the routine of grocery shopping replaced by stunned silence. Parents clutched their children tightly, unsure of what might happen next. Nathaniel's pulse raced. He had been trained for moments like this, moments of intense pressure and life-or-death stakes. But this wasn't a military zone. This was a supermarket aisle, filled with innocent people and terrified onlookers. Keeping his hands raised, he spoke again, his voice calm but firm. Officer? There was no reason for this, Nathaniel thought. He hadn't done a thing wrong, but the officer's eyes burned with suspicion. Her voice, unwavering, cut through the air like a blade. Get down on the ground. Now. Nathaniel hesitated. Lying on the cold, dirty supermarket floor felt like a humiliation too great to bear, a step too far. Yet the crowd around him, their phones now raised and recording, made it clear. Any wrong move could turn catastrophic. His heart pounded, but he had no choice. Slowly, he crouched and lowered himself to his knees. Stay down, she barked, her voice harsh, her gun now fully drawn and aimed at him. Gasps rippled through the crowd, murmurs of disbelief growing louder. A mother shielded her child's eyes, and an older man muttered angrily, "What is she doing?" "He hasn't done anything." Nathaniel glanced up from the floor, his voice steady but firm. "Officer, I am a retired senior Army officer. I've served this country for over 20 years. Whatever this is, it's not right." For a brief moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, but she quickly steeled herself. "Don't move," she warned. "You don't get to decide what's right or wrong here." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, emboldened by Nathaniel's calm defiance. One man stepped forward, phone in hand. "Lady, you're out of line. He hasn't done anything. Put the gun away." The officer glared at him, her voice cold and commanding. "Step back. This doesn't concern you." But the crowd wasn't backing down. More voices joined in, demanding an explanation. "What's he done? Why are you pulling a gun on him?" Nathaniel glanced at the crowd, grateful for their support, but his focus never wavered from the officer. He knew this moment could go either way. With a calm tone, he spoke as though they were the only two people in the store. "You're making a mistake. Please take a step back and think this through." But the officer wasn't listening. She was too deep in the situation now, and the next few moments would decide how it all ended. As the tension in the store reached its peak, a loud voice cut through the chaos. "What's going on here?" The store manager, a middle-aged man with a name tag reading Greg, rushed onto the scene, closely followed by a young security guard named Trevor. Both were stunned by what they saw. The officer with her gun drawn, Nathaniel on the floor, and a crowd of shoppers recording the entire ordeal. Greg stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. "Officer, this is a grocery store, not a crime scene. What exactly are you accusing this man of?" The officer didn't lower her gun. "Suspicious behavior. I have reason to believe he's shoplifting and potentially armed." Trevor exchanged a glance with Greg before speaking up. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring the security cameras. This gentleman hasn't done anything suspicious. He's just been shopping." The officer's face hardened. "Are you sure about that?" "Absolutely," Trevor replied without hesitation. "I can pull up the footage right now if you'd like." Nathaniel, still kneeling with his hands raised, couldn't suppress a small sigh of relief. "You see, officer? There's no reason for this." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices growing louder. "Let him up," one man shouted. "You're way out of line." Greg stepped closer, his tone calm but firm. "Officer, I think it's time to de-escalate. This isn't what you think it is." The officer's grip on her gun faltered for a moment, but she didn't holster it. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the growing crowd, the security cameras, and the undeniable realization that she was losing control of the situation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she took a step back and lowered her weapon. "You're free to go," she said curtly. Nathaniel slowly rose, brushing off his jeans, his voice steady, but carrying the weight of his frustration. "Free to go? I've been humiliated in front of all these people, treated like a criminal. And for what? Because I'm shopping while black." Her face flushed, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned and walked toward the exit, ignoring the crowd's murmurs and the phone still recording her every move. Trevor approached Nathaniel, his expression apologetic. "Sir, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. If there's anything we can do—" Nathaniel held up a hand, offering a tight but understanding smile. "It's not your fault. But this can't keep happening." As Nathaniel left the store, the videos of the incident quickly began to spread online, igniting a firestorm. Within hours, they went viral. Friends, family, even former colleagues reached out, sending him links to the footage that had exploded across social media. The video of the officer drawing her gun in the middle of the supermarket had become a symbol of racial profiling at its worst. Headlines like "Black Veteran Humiliated for Grocery Shopping" spread rapidly. Local news stations in Sacramento were the first to pick up the story, but soon national networks joined in. The hashtags #JusticeForNathaniel and #racial profiling trended, and people from all walks of life demanded accountability. Outrage spread like wildfire. Veterans groups swiftly released statements condemning the officer's actions, while civil rights organizations called for a thorough investigation into what had occurred. Nathaniel's phone rang again. This time, it was a reporter from a major news outlet requesting an interview. But Nathaniel wasn't ready to speak publicly just yet. He needed time to process the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside him. Anger, humiliation, sadness, disbelief. They all churned within him, conflicting yet inseparable. But there was also a deep, unshakable sense of resolve. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every single person who had been unfairly targeted, vilified, and silenced in similar situations. Meanwhile, the pressure on the police department was mounting. The officer involved, identified as Patricia Hayes, was a 6-year veteran of the force. Public records soon revealed previous complaints of excessive force and discriminatory behavior. In response, the department quickly announced that Officer Hayes had been placed on administrative leave, pending an internal investigation. But the public wasn't satisfied. Protests erupted outside the police station, with demonstrators holding signs that read, "Enough is enough," and "Accountability now." The videos continued to circulate, gaining millions of views and sparking heated debates about racial bias in law enforcement. 4 days after the incident, the department held a press conference. The police chief, visibly uneasy under the scrutiny, addressed the crowd. "We take these allegations very seriously," he began, reading from a prepared statement. "Officer Hayes' actions are not reflective of the values of this department. Effective immediately, she has been terminated from her position." The announcement was met with mixed reactions. For some, it was a step in the right direction. But for others, it was far from enough. "Firing one officer doesn't fix a broken system," one protester said during an on-camera interview. As for Nathaniel, after days of contemplation, he finally decided to speak publicly. He appeared on a major news program, sharing his story with grace and dignity. "This isn't about me," he told the host. "This is about making sure no one else has to go through what I went through. It's about holding people accountable and building a future where everyone is treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from." The firestorm had forced a national reckoning, but for Nathaniel, this was only the beginning of a larger fight for justice and equality. In the weeks that followed, the incident remained a hot topic in national conversations. News panels debated the implications of racial profiling, and social media buzzed with calls for systemic change. Activists used the footage to highlight the ongoing issues of bias in law enforcement. Communities across the country rallied, demanding reforms. Nathaniel found himself thrust into a role he had never expected, the role of a public advocate. Invitations to speak at events and participate in discussions poured in. Though he had never sought the spotlight, Nathaniel knew the importance of using his voice. He began working with local organizations to address the deeper, more systemic issues that led to moments like the one he experienced in the supermarket. His story became a powerful reminder that change doesn't come from silence. It comes from holding systems accountable, confronting uncomfortable truths, and standing together against injustice. For Nathaniel, the moment in the supermarket wasn't just a painful memory, it was a catalyst for action. One Saturday afternoon, under the bright sun, Nathaniel stood before a crowd of hundreds gathered at a community rally. Families, veterans, activists, and everyday people filled the park, holding signs and cheering as he approached the microphone. "Let me be clear," he began, his voice steady and strong. "What happened to me is not an isolated incident. It's a symptom of something much bigger. But together, we can change this. We can build a world where no one has to fear being targeted because of how they look or where they come from." The crowd erupted into applause, but Nathaniel's expression remained solemn. This isn't just about calling out bad actors. It's about fixing broken systems. It's about teaching respect and understanding. It's about building a future where our children don't have to live in fear. He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd, before continuing. "So, what can you do? Speak out when you see injustice. Support organizations fighting for equality. And most importantly, treat each other with the dignity we all deserve." As the rally ended, Nathaniel walked away feeling lighter, knowing that the pain he had endured had sparked something meaningful. The road ahead would be long, but he was ready to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for the countless others who couldn't. The incident in the supermarket had become more than just a viral video. It had become a rallying cry for justice and change. And for Nathaniel, it was a reminder that even in the face of humiliation and bias, the fight for what's right is always worth it. If this story resonated with you, don't let it stop here. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Speak up when you see injustice, and remember that every voice matters in the fight for equality. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire change and spark conversation.